What if the Soviet Union won the Cold War? The Cold War was a period after World War II in which the two global superpowers tried to dominate the world from 1947 to 1991. These two, though supporting opposing sides in proxy wars, never went to war with each other thanks to their huge arsenal of nukes and the mutual assisted destruction, or MAD. In the end, the United States of America won, as in 1991 the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics was dissolved and the US was the sole great power for the next 3 decades, but with a second Cold War against the People's Republic of China and Russian Federation emerging. But what if that didn't happen? What if the Soviet Union won the Cold War? In this timeline, the Soviets win the Battle of Warsaw, and with that the Polish-Soviet War, and Poland becomes a Soviet republic within the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. This also causes Germany to be given back Posen and West Prussia. Hungary was also given southern Slovakia and Carpathia under the condition that they join the Little Entente. This made Leon Trotsky more popular, and it is actually him who succeeds Lenin and not Stalin. He would be less cruel than Stalin in our own timeline, especially in terms of human liberties, but that is the bare minimum. While he doesn't send civilians to the gulags, his political enemies aren't as lucky. He would still industrialize, and even faster than Stalin, while also having the party have less influence in the economy. Under him the army is more powerful, but also has a huge degree of influence in the Soviet Union itself. It was this Red Army that would conquer Finland and turn it into the Finnish Soviet Socialist Republic. Unlike Stalin, he would support communists around the world, and in 1939 the Republicans win the Spanish Civil War, only for José Díaz Ramos to overthrow the government with Soviet help and form the Socialist Republic of Spain. In 1939 the Second World War breaks out over the German invasion of Czechoslovakia, and they still defeat the Czechoslovaks and annex Czechia while Hungary takes Slovakia. Germany then steamrolls Denmark, Norway, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Belgium, France, Yugoslavia, and Greece. In 1941 Germany still invades the Soviet Union, but this time they were more prepared, and also owned Poland, and so the Germans were defeated in Smolensk. The German push into the south in 1942 ends just as badly, and the Soviets push the Germans back. In 1943 the Allies land in Italy, and in 1944 they land in Normandy, and in November 7, 1944 Berlin falls. The Soviets and Western Allies meet in December at the Rhine River. Germany would be split into a Soviet and Western zone, and Berlin is not divided. The Soviets also play a bigger role in East Asia as the war ends without American nukes. Japan would end up being split into a Soviet, American, British, and Chinese zone, but when China was banished to Taiwan they gave their zone to the US, and so did the UK because of economic reasons. They would become Japan or South Japan, while the Soviet zone becomes the People's Republic of Japan, or North Japan. In Germany the Soviet zone would be split into the Prussian Democratic Republic in the north and the Danubian Union in Bavaria, Baden-Württemberg and Austria, while the American zone becomes the German Federal Republic. Furthermore, the Netherlands were also split by the Rhine River into the Kingdom of the Netherlands and the Batavian Commune. Denmark also becomes the People's Republic of Denmark, while the US annexes Greenland and UK the Faroe Islands. Thanks to Soviet help the cake wins the Greek Civil War. Unlike Stalin, Trotsky doesn't have a falling out with Tito, and so Yugoslavia joins the Warsaw Pact alongside Spain. NATO meanwhile contains the US, Canada, UK, Portugal, France, Italy, the Benelux, Germany, Norway, Sweden and Turkey. In 1949 the Soviet Union develops nuclear weapons like in our own timeline. In 1950 North Korea still invades the South, but in this timeline the Battle of Incheon is a disaster, and soon later Busan falls, ending both the Korean War and South Korea. Being emboldened by this quick victory, they begin the Japanese War in 1951, and unlike Korea this one would be much longer, well into the 70s. In 1957 Leon Trotsky dies and Georgy Zhukov succeeds him as General Secretary of the Soviet Union. In 1965 the United States also fights in Vietnam, and without a situation in Korea like in our own they launch a full-scale invasion. And as they progress through Vietnam with slowly rising casualty numbers, China invades from the north, and destroy the American army, just causing more discontent. The Viet Cong also rises up in the south and the U.S. has to withdraw all the way to the Song Dong Hai River near Saigon. In 1966 the Sino-Vietnamese W forces win the Battle of Saigon and in 1967 they have to withdraw for good. In 1949 the Madiun Affair resulted in Indonesia becoming socialist, which later invaded North Borneo and East Timor. In 1960 the Malayan emergency ends with a communist victory in Malaya, and by 1983 communists also took over Thailand, and with the Socialist Republic of the Union of Burma holding on almost all of Southeast Asia is under socialist control. West Papua would join Australia. In 1963 the Dhofar Rebellion oversaw the Dhofar overthrowing the government of Oman in favor of a pan-Arab Marxist one. In 1974 Georgy Zhukov dies and Mr. Great Trial Dmitry Yazov becomes General Secretary of the Soviet Union. In 1975 Richard Nixon oversaw the withdrawal out of Japan. Soon later the South falls. In 1978 the Chadian-Libyan War ends with Libya winning and taking the Muzao Strip. The Central American crisis would also see Guatemala, El Salvador and Honduras to be taken over by socialist governments, and then unite with Nicaragua into the Union de Centroamerica. In the 90s they invade Costa Rica and Panama, but would have to lease the Panama Canal to the Soviet Union. In 1965 the Dominican Republic also turns communist and invades Haiti. In 1980 Ronald Reagan still becomes president, and he still does Reaganomics, but here it totally fails, and the United States enter a second Great Depression. In the 1984 election the Communist Party under Gus Hall won in Oregon, Montana, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, New York and Connecticut, denying both Reagan and Mondale 270 votes, and so the House elects the new president with Reagan coming out on top, meaning he can continue Reaganomics for 4 more years. In 1988 the situation had massively deteriorated. The Republican Party under George H.W. Bush only won in Idaho, Utah, Nebraska, New Hampshire, South Carolina and Florida, meaning they only got 47 votes. The Democratic Party got 222 votes, while the Communists got 269 votes, just one short from the 270 threshold. The Republicans agreed to form a coalition with the Democrats, meaning their electoral votes went to them, meaning both got 269 votes, and the House elected the president, and they chose Dukakis. At this point the United States is falling apart, and all he did in his term was fixing the economy and keeping the Union together. In 1990 the Communist Party won a majority both in the Senate and the House. Then in August 1991 some generals tried to overthrow the government, and though it failed the United States now spirals into its end, and Dukakis was forced to dissolve the United States of America in December, with each state becoming its own nation. He himself was left with D.C. This was huge, and the Soviet Union invaded NATO. Prussia annexed Germany, and the Batavian Commune annexed THR Netherlands, Belgium and Luxembourg, and formed the Benelux Federation. France became the French Commune, and Italy became the People's Republic of Italy. Spain annexed Portugal and Ruslan and formed the Iberian Federation, and Danubia annexed South Tyrol. Turkey lost Kars and Ardahan to the Soviet Union and East Thrace to Greece, and became the Turkish Workers' Republic, with Kurdistan becoming the Kurdistan People's Republic. The Soviet Union also occupies Istanbul. The only members left were the United Kingdom and Canada, who formed the Toronto Pact with Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and the Philippines. China would reconquer Taiwan. Algeria, Libya, Egypt, Sudan, Palestine, which conquered Israel, Syria, and Iraq. Yemen and Oman formed the United Arab Republic with Hosni Mubarak as president and Cairo as capital, with Mauritania, Morocco, Tunisia, Lebanon, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain and Kuwait formed the United Sultanate of Arabia under Fard of Saudi Arabia, and Riyadh as capital as a counterforce. In West Africa the socialist states of Mali, Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, Sierra Leone, Burkina Faso, Ghana, Benin, Equatorial Guinea and Congo form alliance, namely the Pan-African Liberation Front, while Senegal, Ivory Coast, Nigeria, Chad, Central African Republic, Cameroon and Gabon forming the West African Alliance, under the leadership of Nigeria. The Congo, East African Federation, Angola, Zimbabwe and Mozambique formed the Indo-Atlantic Pact to counter the growing influence of South Africa, who managed to make the Rhodesians win the Rhodesian-Bush War and couped Botswana to have a friendly regime. In South America Suriname, Guyana, Venezuela, Peru, Bolivia, Paraguay and Chile become socialist and form a coalition with the West Indies Commune and Central America with Colombia, Ecuador, Argentina, Uruguay and Brazil forming an anti-socialist alliance. The French Fifth Republic fled to Guyana. In the United States, battle lines begin to form. New England and Upper New York were invaded by Canada and become a Democratic ally in the lower 48 dominated by the Progressive Party and Democratic Party. Around the Great Lakes, Gus Hall formed the Union of Socialist States of America, but it split with Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and New Jersey becoming a revolutionary socialist government under Gloria La Riva that opposed his totalitarianism. In the Deep South, Strom Thurmond reformed the Confederate States, but then the African Americans rose up and managed to gain independence with the states, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and his home state of South Carolina. Edward Reed Fields would take over. Texas meanwhile declared independence and Mexico took over New Mexico and Arizona. In the Great Plains the military established a military junta, and in the northern states the Midwest Union is declared. Like New England they are democratic, but here the biggest parties are the Republican Party and the Freedom Party. Cascadia declared independence, Nevada and Utah formed Deseret, and California became a democratic socialist state under Alex Lee. Alaska is occupied by Canada and Hawaii declared independence and joined the Toronto Pact. The federal government was only left with Delaware and most of Maryland with Dukakis ruling under a provisional government. In 2001 terrorists launched a terrorist attack in Moscow and the Soviet Union launched a war against terror in Pakistan, and later Iran. This made them distracted, and the US reunites. Communists under Sam Webb took over the Commonwealth of America and after a Republican coup the Deep South rejoined D.C., but Florida became independent. Texas and California kicked Mexico out with Texas taking New Mexico and California taking Arizona. The Midwest conquered Cascadia only for fascists under Richard B. Spencer to coup the government. They would also reconquer the Midwestern Reunification Front only to lose Oregon, Washington, and Idaho to California. Meanwhile the Communists conquered the Deep South, but then they reconquered them. Spencer forms the American National State, or ANS. They however lack the Pacific Commonwealth New England, Texas, New Africa, and Florida. In 2011 the Arab Civil War broke out. The socialists managed to quickly take Morocco, Mauritania, Tunisia, and Lebanon while the monarchists took over Oman and Yemen, but the socialists push into the Arabian Peninsula and by 2014 the war ends and Arabia is unified. Since the Soviets helped them they give Iraqi and Syrian Kurdistan to Kurdistan, but the United Arab Republic would slowly become a superpower like China, or the ANS. In West Africa the socialists took over Senegal, Liberia, ANS, Ivory Coast, but at the expense of Congo, Equatorial Guinea and Benin. West Africa still remains divided. The South African War was a total Toronto Pact victory. South Africa annexed Lesotho, Eswatini, Botswana, Zambia, and Mozambique south of the Zambezi River. Angola, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Tanzania, Uganda, and Congo become pro-Toronto Pact governments. The socialists would also see defeat in Latin America. Initially it looked great as Brazil faced a civil war, but then Mexico invaded Central America and they would end up losing. Ecuador annexed northern Paraguay and Brazil and Argentina divided the rest of Peru, Bolivia, Paraguay and Chile between them. Colombia annexed Venezuela and Panama bringing Gran Colombia back and Mexico puppeted the Federal Republic of Central America meaning the socialists are banished to the Caribbean. In 2016 Spencer was overthrown by a military coup led by Mark A. Milley and the military junta would bring back democracy and in the 2020 United States presidential election 5 major parties would emerge, namely the Progressive Liberal, Libertarian, Conservative and Nationalist Party with progressive Bernie Sanders becoming first president of a renewed United States of America. New England also joined the U.S. peacefully and in exchange they joined the Toronto Pact. They also got back Alaska and Hawaii. Currently the United States is at war with the Pacific states, Texas, New Africa and Florida who formed the Defense Pact and are heavily supported by the Soviet Union. Texas and Florida are nowadays right-leaning illiberal democracies like for example Hungary and OTL. The socialist states of the Pacific unlike other socialist nations has elections between socialist parties like the SPP, PSL or CPP. New Africa is a racist social nationalist ethno-state that discriminates and expels whites, making it homogeneous. Japan never becomes anything like a powerhouse. They lost the Second World War, were divided, fought a long civil war, and then are still hit with their decline from the 90s. Meanwhile, Korea wouldn't have a famine in the 90s, and without having to compete against another Korea, they are doing better than the North in our own timeline. As I previously said, the Soviet Union was fighting Islamists in Pakistan, but it didn't go well because of the terrain, and so in 2020, after a national disaster, they leave the country. Pakistan then falls to civil war and India invades and annexes the country, and since they also took Bangladesh and Sri Lanka by that time, South Asia is now reunified. Initially, India had great relations with the Soviet Union, but after they supported communist terrorists, India backed down, and in 2014 Modi became president, and he cuts off ties with the Soviet Union. Currently, India is holding talks with the United States about a potential entry into the Toronto Pact in order to counter China and to a lesser extent the Soviet Union. The invasion of Iran, however, was more successful, and they managed to defeat the nation. Mahabad had already joined Kurdistan, but was extended into other parts of Iranian Kurdistan, and the Autonomous Republic of Azerbaijan was also extended into ethnic Azeri lands. The United Arab Republic annexed Khuzestan, and the rest becomes the Socialist Republic of Iran under Ali Kaveri. In 2020, Dmitry Yazov dies without having declared any trial, and Valery Gerasimov becomes General Secretary of the Soviet Union. In this timeline, the Soviet Union, although a different Soviet Union, one even more militaristic, is the undisputed master of the world, and they reign supreme. However, like with the United States in the 20s, rivals emerge. These are the People's Republic of China, United States of America, United Arab Republic, and Republic of India, all wanting to become the new superpower, with two of them being socialist while the other two are not. If you liked the episode, leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe. Goodbye.